Hello and welcome back to Perspectives. On today's show, it's all about pressuring politicians who seem to persistently ignore their pesky voters. In the UK, British MPs are demanding why the government is still ignoring their promise for a 1984 inquiry, and Jaggi still languishes in arbitrary detention. Across North America, Sikh organisations are mobilising against Modi's invitation to the G7, amidst newly emboldened Indian journalists now calling for the assassination of Khalistanis. Meanwhile, in Canada, we ask what can the RCMP learn from the failings of the 1984 genocide of Sikhs and Operation Blue Star as they investigate various international war crimes. And as LA continues to melt down, as always, where help is needed, Sikhs are there, remaining neutral as they provide help and support to fellow minorities. We'll take a look at what's going on the ground. All this and more on today's show, but joining me, as always, for Perspectives is our very own correspondent in Canada. It's James Cousineau. Good morning, James.
Good morning, Angus, and good morning to our viewers out there. Don't forget that we are still loving all of your comments and we feature them at the end of the show. Make sure you stick around at the end for the program or for those comments that we share and discuss. Also, keep in mind you can find in the link tree ways to support the channel and other platforms in which you can find us. If you want to take us on the go, you could probably do so with all of the technology now. Other than that, back to you, Angus.
Indeed. And as always, James and I together will be bringing you our perspectives on the daily news affecting the Sikh community across the world. And indeed, at the end of the show, we'll take a look at those great comments. So thank you for those, as always. Right, James, let's get underway. What are you going to start us off with this morning?
Well, let's start off with Los Angeles. The City of Angels are not so much right now. The City of not so many angels, they are misbehaving. But is it really enough to deploy the military, the National Guard and the Marines into the city? That is the big challenge right now between the federal government and the state and city. Now, the state and city feel that they are more than adequately prepared and ready to deal with any type of rioting that breaks out from the protests, but overall, the protests have been fairly peaceful. Now, of course, the agitation came in with the frustration of all of the ICE raids that are going on throughout Los Angeles, and in particular, this area here of Paramount and other regions within the Mexican community and the Hispanic community. And when you look at these photos and images that you're seeing of the city in a meltdown, you see on the screen here where we have some police cars set ablaze. And this actually is a very small area. It actually only encompasses several city blocks when it comes to the areas that are impacted by these protests and by the deployment of the different levels of law enforcement and military. Now, of course, Angus, you and I have spoken about this at length, about different issues and different situations where there's always, as you call them, the provocateurs. And yes, there are some in Los Angeles as well that are just trying to incite the violence, incite the the riots. And of course, the looting. There were about 7 people last night arrested for looting. There were many others that were arrested just for being in the area at the time and not dispersing when they were ordered to do so, given lawful authority to do so. So again, it really is in the news being blown up into look like, the whole city is on fire, but it's actually a 2-block area and one where there's not really any residences. It's more a couple of federal buildings and a little pocket of Los Angeles that's actually quite isolated. It's not a big area as you would believe, but again, it doesn't take away from the danger that the law enforcement and the military are facing. Now, of course, there is the big battle between Donald Trump and Governor Newsom, as well as Mayor Bass. They are really at the end of the opposite end of the spectrum on how they want to deal with it and how they feel it should be dealt with. Now, let's not overlook the fact that to deploy your military members on domestic soil is something that has not been done in the U.S. For many, many years. The last time would have been in the 1960s when the National Guard was called in to escort some of the anti-race riot protests. So again, it shows a big difference when they've been deployed outside of the request of a governor of the state. Now, traditionally and legally, you're supposed to have the governor who deploys or calls up the National Guard. It's not usually the president that steps in and supersedes that sovereign part of the state's control. And that, I think, is where a lot of people are upset. With that said, there are more National Guard and Marines stationed in the area now than they have in Iraq and in Syria combined. So again, it just shows the number of bodies that they've put out there to try and quell the protests and the violence. Now, what exactly is the method or the thought behind it? Well, of course, they don't want to see a repeat of another 1992 when the Watts riots happened and the Rodney King issue, and it was very, very tense. This, on the other hand, the tension is not quite the same. It's not a huge race riot or anti-police riot. This is anti-ICE raids and how it's happening. And I think that what could have been done to de-escalate more rapidly would be to pull the ICE officers out and let the local police and the state police deal with it. But again, it's always easy to sit behind a desk and really, you know, as they call it, an armchair quarterbacking, right? And so, of course, you know, the people on the ground are the best ones to make that decision. And yeah, I have faith that it will come to a peaceful end. I don't think that it's going to break out to something that we've seen in the past, as I said, in 1992, where the devastation and the losses were in the billions of dollars. So again, I don't see that happening here. It's not a big residential area. It's not a lot of retail area. It's more office, and a lot of the office space within this section is the federal buildings. That, on the other hand, is why Donald Trump states that he has brought the federal level in, is because they need to protect the federal property, the federal buildings, as well as the federal officers that are there, the ICE agents and so forth. That's going to be fought out in the court, and we'll see where the legality lies. But again, it's just a very slippery slope when you're dealing with this type of incident, and when you go to the level of bringing in your own, when you're bringing in your own military against your own people. So we'll watch how that plays out. But at the center of it, once again and always, where there is struggle, where there are minorities that are facing challenges, you see the Sikh community stepping in and stepping up. Now, as the tensions have been flaring, of course, the Sikh community has been there providing seva, and that's, of course, the selfless service, and also langar, providing food and assistance to those who need it. Now, the Sikhs that are there are not participating in the protests. Instead, they're there just to help people who need it. And, you know, they are not picking sides, although they've had their struggles, whether it's immigration or the protests. We know what happened in 1984. So, again, they've seen it before, and it's got to be very heartbreaking for them to see it on the streets of Los Angeles and close to their home. Now, the Khalsa Aid Organization, as we spoke of last week, Angus, and or I guess earlier in the week, but, you know, we talk about them quite often because they are such a pillar in not only the local communities, but the international communities. And once again, they are there helping people, giving out bottles of water, making sure people stay hydrated, and just looking after people as a humanitarian source, not as supporting the riots, protests, or anything like that. They're just there in the humanitarian role, as of course we know the Sikh community always does. They are just amazing people to look after, whether it's the Hispanic community, whether it is the African American community, or anybody else. They're always there to really give a hot meal, give a cold bottle of water, and just most of all, show them that they are cared for and that people are supporting them from all different aspects of life, Angus.
Yes, indeed. I think what's going on in LA is we've seen it unfold in many cities across the world over decades. It's a very familiar sort of story. It's an interesting. It's almost like a recipe that has just the right ingredients to create this sort of high profile riot. It's got a very unhappy population. It's got some huge political move forward, some forward step by a powerful ego-driven political party, and then it's got an area what's the word I'm looking for? Part of the community who are deeply affected by it, and that is fertile ground for this very situation to grow. Because, and again, I always use the word agent provocateur. The agent provocateurs are always looking just for these ingredients to create this situation. They are looking for people who are disaffected, who are unhappy, who feel oppressed, who are angry. So all the emotions are running high. It's a very volatile situation. So of course these agents provocateurs, who basically, let's face it, they are anarchists. They don't want society to run in the way it runs. But for whatever reason that drives their mentality, they are just basic, pure and simple anarchists. They've existed since the beginning of time for whatever reason. It's down to simple genetics. And of course they wade into situations like this and say, right, let's all the ingredients here, let's whip this up, let's build it up into something that serves our agenda, our anarchic agenda. And that's basically what they've done here. And of course these minority communities who do feel persecuted, who do probably have a legitimate political protest, under normal circumstances they would just take to the streets with their banners and shout and bang drums, whatever it is, but they would do it peacefully and just through the normal process of democracy. Instead, the agents provocateurs have come in here and said, no, there's a better way of doing this. We can set fire to things. Let's be heard. Let's make sure we get on the media. Now, that's exactly what's happened. In reality, also, what's also happened is it is, as you say, concentrated in a very, very small area. This isn't widespread, the whole city burning. It is, in fact, as you say, it's just a few city blocks. In other words, the agents provocateurs just don't have that power to spread it wider. And the will actually clearly is not there in a wider geographical area. Now, fueling this fire, not just the agents provocateurs, is the 24-hour, 7 days a week news cycle. News outlets need to they need viewers, they need an audience, they need clicks, they need whatever it is. And so they're looking for any story that they can blow up into something, oh my gosh, it's the old clickbait. So of course the news cameras are there trying to create this Armageddon, this scene of Armageddon, because they know that's what people watch, that's what people want to watch, etc. So again, all the ingredients are there just to create something that actually is really not what it appears at first sight. So all that aside, I think the really encouraging thing here is the stance of the Sikh community. And I often say this is why the Sikh community are just not fully appreciated for exactly what they are. They have taken the most intelligent, the most sensible, civilized stand in this situation. Of course, the Sikh community are affected by ICE raids because they are a minority, and there is no doubt that there will be some illegal immigrants part of the Sikh community. It's natural that every minority is probably directly affected by this situation. But what have the Sikh community done? They haven't taken sides. They haven't got out there with their banners and set fire to police cars. That's just not what Sikhs do. Instead, they have taken a neutral stance and said, right, who needs help? And they've gone out there and they've provided, under Saver, their selfless service, they've gone out and they are helping those. Doesn't matter what flag they carry, it doesn't matter what side of the fence they're on, they will be out there helping anybody who needs assistance, who needs support, etc., etc. And this is just so typical of the Sikh community, and why it must be so frustrating as a community that the wider world just does not appreciate what good they do. Again, it's because they do not self-promote. They do not go out and tell the world, this is what we do, this is how good we are. It's up to people like us, James, to get out there and tell the world, do you realise what the Sikhs are doing to our society, what contribution they're making? Because they are certainly not appreciated for what they do, James. So yeah, again, I think this is, once again, another prime example of the great contribution that the Sikh community is giving to the world.
And that's a part of our job, Angus. We're always proud and happy to shine that light on the Sikh community in a positive way and educate people about the amazingly helpful and courteous and empowering work that they do. And that's, I think, the most descriptive word is empowering, because through their seva, through their langar, they are empowering people at different levels and in different ways. And their job in their life is to help others and to really not leave anybody behind. So again, just a great respect for all that they do. And even in situations like this where, they want the calmer heads to prevail, they want to be there to support everybody, but at the same time, they are far from the instigators. It's again, like we've said, there are some paid instigators in ways, and I say that because they make money off of, selling their stories later or their video footage for clicks online to get them built up and, monetize their sites. So there's a lot of different motivations that we see behind these idiots that like to stir it up and turn it violent when it's just an otherwise peaceful protest. And, whether or not the Marines and the National Guard being deployed is an overstep, whether it is way disproportionate to what's needed. Well, again, as I said, it's easy to sit back in my warm office here and watch it on TV, but it's a totally different thing to be there and to have to make those decisions. So again, it is what it is, as they say, Angus, and we'll have to watch how it plays out. But hopefully it settles down. They are expecting another protest tomorrow, but at a much lower scale in terms of the numbers. So hopefully that just calms down and things kind of get back, to normal. Next week, of course, they have coming up Donald Trump's big military parade. So I think that this might be a warning to people, too, not to interrupt with that parade, or they will face the same type of crackdown to deal with any of the dissent. Now, moving on, Angus, because we are, of course, on a time crunch as always, but we'll move on here. And this second story is not going to be too long, but I thought that it was important to bring up because there is the Canadians for Justice and Peace in the Middle East who has forwarded a letter to the Attorney General of Canada. And this is actually in response to the fact that it's recently come out that the Royal Canadian Mounted Police are actually involved in an international investigation against Israel for war crimes being conducted with the current situation in Gaza. Now, why I bring this up is because I think that their concerns are very legitimate that they bring forward to the government. And that is, A, that there's been this ongoing investigation for over a year and it's been kept very tightly wrapped. And the concerns that they have is, unlike in Ukraine where they're investigating war crimes, they are really in a silent kind of background where they are not being public. In Ukraine, they had websites. They had people on the ground interviewing alleged victims and their families and witnesses and all of this. They had, as I said, a website portal that was open for people to make online complaints, to bring forward their stories and their evidence. Whereas here in the Middle East, it's been a different story. It's a totally different type of situation, and therefore it's a lot more clandestine, the investigation in itself. However, with that said, as I was pointing out, that the concerns they raise are about the integrity of the investigation, the lengths of the investigation in terms of the ability for witnesses and evidence to be submitted, because there is no online portal for this particular war crimes investigation, and whether or not they are investigating any potential Canadians who volunteered to go over as independent fighters on behalf of Israel as well. So it is a big, big story in terms of the fact that there is the investigation. It's now been confirmed finally, as a lot of people have been calling for this investigation to happen, but nobody realized that it's actually been going on since early 2024. Now, to sum up, the recommendations that they had, of course, were in relation to issues that we've seen that are still an issue today from the issues in India in 1984. And that is the evidence was not preserved properly. The information was not documented in public record as it should have been, and this prevents a lot of people from being held accountable, even to this day, for the genocide of the Sikhs in 1984. This group does not want to see that type of situation happen again. They want to ensure that there is a place where the evidence can be gathered, where it can be cataloged, where it can be documented for any type of prosecution that may happen down the road. And let's face it, with these type of prosecutions, it can sometimes take decades to track down the people and bring them before a court. When that happens, it's so important that the chain of custody and the evidence itself is solid, that it's preserved, that the integrity is intact. And that, again, is a part of the problem with 1984 with India, is that we don't have that outside information and investigation where it should have happened, and it still should happen before it's too late. Because let's face it, those of us who were around in 1984 are still working our way up there in years. So again, that the integrity and the ability to prosecute those involved may deteriorate over time. So that's what they have concerns. So just quickly, their recommendations to the Canadian government, and this was from 2024, that they issued various different suggestions and different requests of the government. And then more recently, again, they are just asking that to emphasize that any of the people who are acting as Canadian or who are Canadian are acting as voluntary soldiers, essentially, are also investigated and held to account. They don't know at this point if there are other points that are being investigated and how far it goes. And that's the other thing that they are suggesting at this time, is to be more involved with the Canadian public, to let us know what's going on, keep us abreast of the situation as much as they can, without, of course, putting the lives of the investigators at risk or others within the region. But that seems to be the biggest thing, is that they want communication. And I don't think that that is so far off from a realistic request, Angus.
Yes, I find this very interesting because it is relevant in a wider context. And I think, and I refer back to the Freedom House report that we talked about last week. And of course, India, under the Freedom House report, in their annual assessment, this objective assessment of how free and democratic any nation on the planet is, and India scored very, very poorly. But at the other end of the scale, one of the highest scoring countries, essentially one of the most free, one of the most democratic countries, was Canada. This was no coincidence. And the reason is because Canada, for whatever reason it's evolved, has actually evolved an extraordinarily liberal, in its literal sense of the word, and its society is truly democratic in just about every sense of the word. And this is why the RCMP and the authorities in Canada are actually involved in, let's say, a wider context. I mean, in terms of population, it's a relatively small country. Geographically, it's huge, but in terms of population, it is a relatively small country, yet it swings a big weight, primarily because it is seen democratically as one of the leading nations on the planet. Its effect is disproportionate to its size, its demographics. And it was no coincidence, for example, that Jaswant Singh Kalra, the Shaheed, the martyr Jaswant Singh Kalra, addressed the Canadian Parliament in, I think it was 1985, just before he himself was murdered by the Indian police. Jaswant Singh Kalra, of course, had been investigating the, sorry, is it 95? Anyway, whichever year that he was martyred. But he had spent years investigating the deaths, the extrajudicial killings going on in India. He was a Sikh, he lived in the Punjab, and he realised that Sikhs were being murdered across the Punjab by the state. And he collected this evidence, and then he was the one who actually brought it to global attention by addressing, didn't go to the US, didn't go to the UK, he went to the Canadian Parliament and addressed the Canadian Parliament and told them what was going on in India, in the Punjab at that time. Again, no coincidence, because it has been recognised that Canada actually does stand in the vanguard of pushing democracy across the world. And so when, for example, the murder of Hardeep Singh Nijjar last year by presumably the Indian state, again, this has provoked the Canadian state, the Canadian body, whatever you want to call it, basically the drivers of Canadian politics, they are involved. They are heavily involved. Again, no coincidence that Trudeau was the only global leader to stand up and call out India for this very blatant assassination of one of its citizens on its soil. Trudeau did that. Again, a huge political risk to himself, and it did damage him politically, but again, he was standing up for that right. So it is no surprise that this is going on behind the scenes. Yes, of course, Canada is looking at Israel's alleged war crimes. Likewise, it probably is doing an awful lot. CSIS, the RCMP, behind the scenes are no doubt investigating what is going on in India, because of course it has a direct impact on the investigation of Hardeep Singh Nijjar and others that's going on behind the scenes in in Canada. So James, I have no doubt there is an awful lot going on beneath the surface that we are not aware of, that the Canadian state are looking at, are involved in, and I dare say their investigations in India are probably deeper than we realise. The question is, will it come out publicly? I don't know, but I wonder if that information, that intelligence, is also being passed around the Five Eyes. I am sure it is, so that Trump will know about it. I dare say the UK government, not that track record they will do much about it, but I dare say that intelligence is being shared around the democratic world, James.
Absolutely. And at the end of the day, I mean, it's all about the integrity. It's all about, the evidence. And I think that that's a big differentiation between today's day and age and 1984. Today, a lot of it can be documented and preserved through online video, through online photos, through online sharing of stories and personal stories where, when things die down, I think we'll see a lot more come out from people who are, they may have been targeted or felt targeted and are not in a safe place to post now or to share with the world at large. So I think we'll see a lot more information in that is there. But again, when it's shared online in public forums, it's also about the credibility. And we talk about deep fakes and AI, or just misinformation and disinformation to manipulate a situation to make it appear as something it's not. So again, we'll watch how it plays out, and that gives a different world in terms of 1984 versus today and getting information sharing out there.
Indeed. Well, looking at politicians and states and the success or failure thereof, I've actually sung the praises of Canada for I would say, a very favourable stance that they've taken over the situation with India. Well, let's contrast that with what's been going on in the UK. And do our MPs, does our government actually walk the walk? It talks the talk, but is it walking the walk? Well, once again, I feel a sense of deja vu here. I seem to be doing this on a regular basis. But once again, British MPs, particularly representing the Sikh communities, have had to stand up in our parliament once again and ask our government, the Labour government that was elected, and all sorts of promises, saying, well, when are you going to deliver on your promises? And of course, I'm specifically referring to two key areas here. First, of course, is this investigation into the British involvement in the events of 1984, particularly Operation Blue Star. And of course, Jagtar Singh Johal, who still resides in prison under arbitrary detention by India. He is a British citizen, and yet the British government, despite all its promises to free him, still don't seem to be doing anything whatsoever about it. And so, again, I talk about the sense of deja vu. Well, MPs have once again stood up in our parliament and said, look, what are you doing about it? And I just want to play you a quick video. This is Jas Atwal. He represents the Ilford constituency. This is an East London constituency. Of course, again, a large Sikh community there. But this is him standing up in the British Parliament a few days ago.
Following on from my honourable friend from Wolverhampton West, this week marks the tragic week, the 41st anniversary of the raid on the Golden Temple in Amritsar. 41 years later, questions of the British involvement in the desecration of the holiest Sikh site in Amritsar remains unanswered. Labour promised in 2017 and 2019 manifestos to hold an inquiry. The Prime Minister and the Deputy Prime Minister, before the election, pledged to do so. Would the leader allow time for an update from the Foreign Secretary on the progress of implementing this inquiry and ensure promises made in opposition are fulfilled in government?
Well, I really do understand how important it is for the Sikh community to see progress on this issue, and it's now the second time that it's been raised with me this morning, so I will ensure that the Foreign Secretary is aware of these concerns being raised with me again on the floor of the House, and that the update I'd previously asked for is made available to members and this House.
And so the response from the government spokeswoman is, it's the second time this morning that somebody's asked me about it. Well, it might be the second time this morning. It's about the 100th time that your own MPs have asked you the same questions, and we always get the same answer. Blah, blah, blah. We just get nonsense. We get no actual results. And I'm not holding my breath on David Lammy, our Foreign Secretary. Do you honestly think he's going to do anything about it? Well, so far he's produced absolutely nothing. He has let us down. He's let the community down over and over again. They've been in power for nearly 1 year and they have done absolutely zero. Nothing. Nada. Nothing has been done about Jagtar Singh Johal. There is no public announcement, no move whatsoever towards this promised inquiry into 1984 Operation Blue Star. And I reported, I think, a couple of weeks ago that the Sikh community have actually said, and spokespeople from the Sikh community have just said, look, unless we hear by the end of July, that's only, 4 or 5 weeks away, 5 or 6 weeks away, unless we hear the announcement of this inquiry, this promised inquiry that you promised us when in opposition, unless that is announced by the end of July, then we will prevent any Labour MPs being platformed or entering any Sikh space here in the UK. In other words, we basically will excommunicate ourselves. We are your main supporters, but you will be excommunicated. You will be cut loose from the Sikh community. We do not want you to enter any of our premises, any of our gurdwaras, etc., etc. So be warned. Now, also talking about politicians ignoring the Sikh community. Well, the network of Sikh organisations. This is an organisation that represents, I think it's about 130 gurdwaras around the UK. They are an umbrella organisation. It is a charitable organisation. It's set up as a charity, but in essence, it exists to represent the Sikh community here in the UK. So it does represent all the gurdwaras, all the gurdwaras around the UK. And their director, a gentleman called Lord Singh, attended a meeting earlier last week. It was an all-party delegation, which actually was made up only of Indians, Indian diaspora. They met with the all-party parliamentary group for India. That is a group of British MPs who are joined in the consensus to talk about and act on behalf of the British government in all dealings with India. They exist to create the policy, to advise the government on anything to do with India, this all-party parliamentary group. And they met this all-party delegation, primarily made up of Indian diaspora, and Lord Singh was in attendance, and he was the only attendee in this meeting who actually questioned India's human rights record. So whilst all the others were talking about trade, commerce, building relations, etc., it was only Lord Singh, the only one who actually raised this question of India's human rights. And he said, to borrow from the poet, rivers, mountains and British politicians interpose to make one people implacable foes. He said, I have no time for the generals running Pakistan, but if you'll excuse me, there has been too much smugness about blaming Pakistan for everything wrong on the subcontinent. Of course, this is the fallout from the Pahalgam terror attack and Operation Sindoor. The meeting essentially was to brief the all-party parliamentary group about Operation Sindoor and the Pahalgam terror attacks. So, as the network of Sikh organisations said, India has to look at its own human rights record. There is a general feeling in this country that India has moved from its secular credentials and talks about Jaggi, imprisoned in India for 7 years, declared innocent by the courts, still languishing in an Indian prison. And so the British India All-Party Parliamentary Group that this meeting was for was presented, and unsurprisingly, all the Indian diaspora attendees there, except for Lord Singh, were representing presumably most of the Hindu agenda. So, of course, they didn't want to raise the issues of human rights because they're a little bit uncomfortable, they're a little bit embarrassing, those issues. So it's unsurprising then that it was only Lord Singh who actually raised these issues because they are the uncomfortable truth. And when you look at the all-party parliamentary group, it's actually a recent creation from the last government. It was reformed under Starmer's government. And if you look at its website, its purpose is to promote the strengthening of bilateral relations between the UK and India. It's a good thing. We need it. It has to exist. I'm very pro-India. I love our relations with India, except for this issue of human rights. But when the all-party group look at relations with India, they are looking at, and publicly so, trade and investment. First of all, they're looking at commerce. They're looking at how we can build commerce with India. And then the other areas include education, sustainable development, culture, health, science, innovation, defence, security, and enhancing the relationship, just generally speaking. But human rights doesn't really feature much in this list. Of course it wouldn't, but it should. And it is unsurprising that Lord Singh has raised this. It is not surprising the other Indian attendees didn't raise this because it is embarrassing. And it is, again, it signals the fact, once again, as we often report, our government are really not interested. This Labour government under Starmer and this, I have to say, useless Foreign Secretary David Lammy are not representing the voters, particularly in the Sikh community. They have ignored them. They made all these promises, as they always do in opposition, saying, yes, of course we'll give you what you want. We'll give you the freedom of Jagtar Singh Johal. We'll give you this inquiry. And as soon as they're in government, what are they doing? Yes, the all-party parliamentary group forms, and they want to talk about trade and commerce, about building business. We don't want to talk about that uncomfortable thing called human rights. Oh no, let's just push that to one side. We don't care. We'll pay lip service to it. The second question this morning in Parliament from Sikh MPs. Yes, we will. I will talk to David Lammy about it. Blah blah blah. Let's look at the results. The results, we are 1 year into the Labour government and still we are waiting for anything. Literally anything. We have had nothing. No announcements, we're not even hearing lip service to it. Absolute silence from Lammy and Starmer. They're not even repeating the words that they used pre-government when they refer to Jaggi as being in arbitrary detention. They won't even use those words now. They have betrayed the Sikh community. And I keep hammering on about this. I wish the Sikh community would wake up. The Labour government, this Labour government, does not represent you in any way, shape or form, as indeed the previous Conservative government did not represent you. They have betrayed you like every other government before them. It is absolutely despicable, James.
Absolutely. And overall balance there, it is something that just we see over and over with government and their promises. I mean, let's face it, Angus, what was it? Oh, blah, 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 I think is a universal political technical term. Because whether you're in the UK, whether you're in Canada, whether you're in India, Pakistan, it doesn't matter. It's all the same when it comes to the politicians failing to follow through on what their obligations are. And I don't say their commitments, I say their obligations, because I think it goes beyond the commitment to to be obligated to their people to find out the truth, to get to the bottom of it, and to move forward. And when they fail to act, then of course that is a serious concern. You have other groups that are going to be obviously on the other side of the coin saying, well, there's nothing to see here, just move along. But that's not the case, Angus.
Indeed. And the words blah, 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 here's something to throw out to our audience. I wonder if there's anybody in our audience who knows the significance of the words blah, blah, blah in relation to Toronto. I'll leave that hanging there. I guess that means nothing to you, James, does it? Toronto?
Not at all, no.
Right, well, I'll leave that to anybody in our audience, particularly Canadians in our audience. It's a very obscure reference, and if anybody gets it, I'll mention that in another show. If not, I'll have to reveal the answer. It's nothing to do with the Sikh community, but it has particular reference to those words blah, blah, blah and Toronto and YYZ. There's another clue. Right, James, let us move on to my second story. And again, unfortunately, we're talking about failing politicians, but we are staying with Canada. We keep the Canadian reference. The New Democratic Party. We've talked, James, of course, about this invitation to Modi to the G7. And the New Democratic Party, unsurprisingly, as have many people, they've stood up and said, hang on a second, this is really not acceptable. And their national security critic, has a lady called Jenny Kwan, has come out publicly and stated it is unconscionable that the government would roll out the red carpet for Modi, whose regime has been directly implicated in the assassination of Najjar. This form of transnational oppression is a direct threat to our diaspora community and indeed our sovereignty. The government needs to explain itself, basically, at a time when India refuses to cooperate with Canadian authorities, denies responsibility for extrajudicial killings. The move undermines efforts to hold foreign powers accountable for interference and violence in our country. Now, this is a really, really powerful statement, and it's not surprising in any way, shape or form. And again, referring back to what I was talking earlier, James, about Canada standing up, and certainly I have to say, standing in the vanguard of global democracy. It really is quite shocking that Carney has extended this invitation. And unsurprisingly, the backlash has been widespread across the Sikh community across the world, not just in Canada. The World Sikh Organisation itself has said the federal MP has come out in opposition. Unsurprisingly, the NDP Public Safety and National Security critic Jenny Kwan said, quote, and then gives a quote, and they have endorsed what she said. We appreciate the stance, making it clear that the Sikh community in Canada is not expendable. So, and again, the backlash has gone very wide. Baz News, as unsurprisingly again, has reported on a lot of this. And they have actually, of course, Baz News, the people behind Baz News do have their ears to the ground. They obviously have a huge network that provides them with a huge amount of information and intelligence from the Sikh community around the world, around the diaspora. And they have said that sources share that Sikhs will lead massive protests in response, considering India was found by the RCMP to be engaging in transnational oppression. And of course, the use of gangs, these proxy criminal gangs, to target Sikh Canadians. And they also refer to Amit Shah, Modi's second in command, as being heavily involved in using these proxy gangs to conduct homicide, arson, extortion, etc., etc. And it's not just in Canada, of course. We do know this is going on in the United States as well. And of course, again, they referred to, James, as we talked about at great length, this public inquiry into foreign interference that did indeed find it that India was the second most active actor of foreign interference in Canada. And that is quite a claim, bear in mind that Russia and China, we do know how involved they are in terms of interfering in Canadian and other nations' politics. Now, more concerningly, and I think this is really the impact of things like this invitation to Modi to the G7. Of course, by inviting Modi to the G7, it is sending out a very clear message, particularly to India. The message is, it's okay what you've been up to. We're turning a blind eye to it. Yeah, okay, we know it's wrong, but actually we're more interested in talking commerce, in talking trade deals, in talking bilateral deals, in talking about selling arms and munitions to India, etc. It's about bringing you alongside in alignment from a geopolitical perspective in terms of buttressing China, etc., etc. This uncomfortable news about human rights, we don't really want to talk about it, so you carry on, just don't make it too obvious, is essentially the message that's being sent to India. Now, as evidence of that, and quite concerningly so, right across social media, of course, the Hindutva army are emboldened. They have said, this is great. It doesn't matter what our leaders are doing. It doesn't matter that we're assassinating Khalistanis overseas. We're getting away with it. Clearly, they don't care. The West doesn't care. Evidence of that. This is Srimoy Talukdar. This guy is a senior mainstream journalist in India. He is the deputy executive editor of First Post. He was the deputy news editor of the Times of India. He has a blue chip CV. This guy is a proper mainstream Indian journalist. He tweeted, we will take out more of the Khalistani gang members who harm India's interests sitting on your country's soil. And you guys can do nothing about it. Cope with it, basically. Now, there was a response to that from someone who said, I hope we have at least insisted that his people don't commit any assassinations while he is here. And so that was Streamer's response to that. And so he's basically said, we're going to take out more, and there's nothing you can do about it because clearly you don't care enough about it. And Stephen Maher came back and responded, well, if that's your intention, you should suggest increasing the operational capabilities of your assassins. The previous plot, this is referring to Gurpatan Singh Panoon assassination attempt, it was uncovered easily. It seemed childish even. In other words, don't go around trying to hire DEA agents to be your hired killers, for instance. In other words, this guy is taking the proverbial out of him. But the message here is very, very concerning and is very serious. Basically, this is a mainstream Indian journalist who is essentially, saying we will go out and assassinate these Khalistanis because you're doing nothing about it. We're getting away with it. So, we are emboldened. We're going to carry on doing it. And I think this is very, very concerning. And I think the Western leaders need to wake up to this fact that by inviting Modi, you are essentially endorsing India's behaviour. You are saying it's okay. You are getting away with it. And another person on social media, this is Gurpreet Sahota. He's again an activist. He's the editor of a newspaper. He presents various things in Canada specifically. But he said pressure is mounting on Liberal Party MPs to take a stand against the killings of Canadians, particularly on Canadian soil, and to uninvite Modi from the G7. Sikh meetings are underway. The demand is, if Mark Carney is not listening to them, familiar story here, then stand with the protesters at G7 events. Otherwise, they will not be welcome on Sikh stages. So this, again, highlights grassroots power. Here in the UK, the Sikh Federation UK has said, unless British MPs deliver this 1984 inquiry, we will not welcome you on any Sikh stages. Likewise in Canada, same thing's happening. Grassroots movements are saying, look, if you don't represent us, if you don't stop pandering to Modi's government and welcoming them, putting out the welcome mat, then we will make sure you, as politicians, are not welcome on our territory, in our gurdwaras, on our platforms. We will not welcome you on Sikh stages. So there you go, James. Once again, this disjoint between our politicians and our grassroots, the very people who elect these people into their positions of power.
Absolutely. And I mean, it's one of those situations where if they actually touch on human rights and they touch on transnational repression and those things, that is, that I understand trying to get that face to face is important to get the dialogue going with the new government that we have here in Canada. But at the same time, my hopes are not that high that they are going to take the human rights and the Sikh concerns seriously when it comes to the face-to-face meeting between Carney and Modi. And that, I think, is where the sentiment comes off, that people are worried that it's sending the wrong message if there is not a definitive timeline or agenda in order to try to talk about these things. And that's where Canadians want answers. We want to know why Modi's coming to Canada. We want to know, with his history of transnational repression, with his history of involvement with the election interference, as well as other interference in Canada, it's important that we understand the mindset of having him here. But at the same time, do you want to put too much out publicly and therefore seem like you're challenging him in the media before he even arrives? That's, a delicate balance. But again, my hopes are not high.
Yes, indeed, James. And really, it's all down to simple real politics. The situation is very clear. The West needs and wants India alongside from a bigger picture perspective because of the concern about China. And by doing so, they are deliberately and under real politics ignoring basic human rights. That's really what it all comes down to. So anyway, let's move on, James, into our comments column. And again, loads of lovely comments, wonderful comments from everybody. Thank you to our wonderful, loyal audience who have stuck with us through thick and thin. And And well, starting us off today is actually one of our critics, and I've not given our critic Killer 3 the ignominy and the humiliation of appearing in Critics Corner. Instead, I've promoted you with your comment to this page to say you're laughing that more people have signed and petitioned for a Game of Thrones remake than this Khalistan referendum. It's a day out for these Sikhs in Western countries, and then they get to go home and keep dreaming. Well, unfortunately, Killer, yes, absolutely, it is quite possible that more people have campaigned and voted to remake Game of Thrones, but that doesn't make any difference. The whole point of a referendum is to assess amongst a people. There might be 10 people, there might be 10 million people, it doesn't matter. The absolute numbers are not important. It's the relevant, it is the proportionate numbers that matter in a democracy. Again, are you saying therefore that, for example, in the UK we have a population of about 60 million, but the US has a population of, what was it, 350 million? Are you saying that our voting, because less people vote in the UK, that has less relevance than people voting in the United States, for example? In other words, your argument fails from a logical perspective. I do understand the point, though, and I do understand your point, but unfortunately, the reality is democracy works via voting. It is an electoral system. This is how it works, and whether you like it or not, the Punjab must be given a referendum. And as we keep saying, James, there is a very simple way to get rid of the Khalistan movement. Give it its referendum. Give the Khalistan movement a referendum, and then prove us wrong. That's it, James. It's very simple.
Absolutely, Angus. And we've had the issue in Canada where the biggest movement and the biggest opposition to anything where the Canadian public stood up was when Rogers, our main communication company, and others jacked the prices up of our cable vision without permission. They did this reverse billing. And that, it wasn't politics. It wasn't, environment. It was about our cable TV. So it's also about, sometimes it's just a certain issue that brings in the mainstream votes from all over different nations and different ethnicities and different backgrounds and all of that. So let's face it, it gets cold in Canada in the wintertime. And if you're not watching TV, that means you're probably cuddled up with the wife, and you can only do that so long before she wants to talk about your feelings. So that's why I think they screamed at the cable companies.
Absolutely, yes. Gosh, yes. Less of that we talk about, the better. Now, of course, these comments came after my podcast with Dr. Sandy, and we talked at great length actually about this waging war, this war that the Indian state has been waging on the Sikh people since at least 1947, and the comments that followed were all pretty much of a theme, and the next two comments really just a selection that sum up that theme. Malkeet Gadhu says, Dr. Singh Sandhu Zindabad, and Harry Singh said, full support Khalistan, free Punjab from India. I think the message from certainly our audience was very, very clear. In response to this, setting out all the evidence there, James, is the Indian state is indeed waging this unnecessary war on the Sikh people in the Punjab. So there is only one solution, and it's a solution for both sides, that where everyone wins is let's establish Khalistan, because of course, then the Sikhs in the Punjab win, they get what they want. But more importantly for India, India gets what it wants. It gets rid of this thorn in its side that will never go away. I can promise the Indian state, I can promise the upper caste Brahmins, Sikhs will never go away. They will never let this lie. The Khalistan issue will be there until the universe ends, unless you establish Khalistan. So you can have peace in India. This can all go away by establishing the state of Khalistan, James.
And I'm still waiting to go for lunch at the cafe in downtown, whatever the capital ends up being in Khalistan. So again, we want to see it happen because we truly believe that it is the right thing to do, Angus.
We don't just believe, we know it's the right thing to do. We do indeed look very much forward to our first broadcast from Khalistan. Now, Sahib Jotathwal says every Hindu foundation should be checked around the world and should be banned. Yeah, this is in response to the story we did about the HAF and this investigation launched from California, Gurdwara in California, saying, look, we need to check out, the Department of Justice needs just to work out just exactly what the Hindu American Foundation is all about, who's funding it and why, because its agenda is very clear. And it's not just the HAF. There are sister organisations in Canada, we have it here in the UK. They are all fronts for the RSS, and absolutely right, they should be investigated and actually worked out what exactly it is that they're up to. Should they be banned? That's a different argument. We all believe in freedom of expression. They should be free to campaign, but transparently. That's the key there, James. The word is transparently, so people know that they are a front for the RSS. They are not some independent organisation.
Absolutely. And that's just it, Angus. It's all about transparency. It's all about, holding on to the dignity of the system that's in place. But if you allow the different organizations to skirt around the regulations and around the rules, then, of course, you're just opening the door to other nefarious and darker organizations that want to have input in less reputable ways, we'll put it.
Indeed, and the next two comments follow, again, the same theme. And again, this is something I really talk about on a regular basis because I find it so inspirational, is that Sikhs don't just respect other faiths, they promote other faiths. And as Hap B says, yeah, Sikhs don't convert, they believe you do you. Let Sikhs practice Sikhi. But then Hap B talks again about the Hindutva BJP government. It is pretending to be the secular country. India is, under its constitution, supposed to be secular, and it pays lip service by sending Muslims and women in the delegations abroad. But in reality, the non-Hindus are abused every single day in India, in Parliament, wherever. India is trying to fool the world once again, James.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be interesting to see how things play out when Modi gets here to Canada, because it's a very isolated location, but I think that there's enough people angered, not just in the Sikh diaspora, but I think there's enough people angered with India's actions about sovereignty and breaching our sovereignty here in Canada that, yeah, I think people are going to stand up and really raise a voice to the injustices that India partakes in.
And this comment from, and again, my Punjabi, I hope I translated this correctly, is from the Voice of Truth. Do let me know if I've got that wrong. Thanks, this for a great job. Now, this is an interesting comment. This is actually, this person's talking about the genocide is ongoing, and it talks about the caste system. Why is caste created? Just because clever people don't want to work for themselves, lower caste, why should they have to work harder to basically support the upper caste? And then you then talk about, well, how can anybody behave like this and then actually think they're going to go to heaven when they're behaving like this? So that I think that summarizes this comment. And I think my response to this is, unfortunately, human beings are human beings. Is that in any society there is a hierarchy. Humans, just by virtue of what they are, I suppose like many animal species, they always organise themselves into hierarchies. Even cows in a field organise themselves into hierarchies. It's just nature. It's just the way nature works. The real question, I think this is what separates uncivilized to civilized, is that civilized first world societies, despite these hierarchies, they recognise these hierarchies to some degree, but they don't determine the structure of society. They don't determine social policy. They don't determine how life is lived. Everyone is treated equal. And this is why Sikhi is, in religious terms, a first world religion. It is not a third world religion. This is why Sikhi it stands head and shoulders above so many other religions, is because it treats everybody equal. And anybody in Sikhi can indeed dream of going to heaven or recycling through to their next life with a clear conscience, because they treat everyone as equal. They have rejected the caste system. And this, I think, is really what makes Sikhi different, James.
Absolutely. And, I don't really know that I can add much to that, Angus, because it is, whether it's a monarchy, whether it's the caste system, whether it's, even as far as communism, it, all has its different layers of subtlety. But again, some of it's in your face, some of it's not, but you still have that chain of command or that, that separation.
And India cannot become a first world nation until it gets rid of this caste system. It needs to rid itself of this evil caste system. And final set, and I always do like to do a few shout-outs to some of our commenters, and we do get loads and loads of just simple comments, like Icon Kai just says hi, and Ujagar Singh says hello both of you, brother, and Pam Sidhu says thank you for bringing the truth out. Well, indeed, this is a hi and a hello to you, our audience, and we do appreciate, as I say, we read every single comment that comes in, even the little simple highs, good mornings, whatever. Yes, thank you. And when you do that, do know that we say it back to you, and this, again, is a blanket hi, good morning, good evening, good day to you, whatever time of day it is to you, that we do appreciate your comments, however small or simple. We do read them and we love them, James.
Absolutely. And with that said, remember to let us know what time zone that you're watching from, so when we do eventually go live, we can kind of figure out the best times in which to set our schedule.
And to wrap up today's show, Khalistani Jat says, long live Canada, long live Canada, long live America, long live America, long live America. And again, James, we had a bit of a chuckle the other day about, we get lots of these comments that sort of leave us hanging. Well, that one has left us hanging. And, well, who else? Well, I think Mastan Singh Dulai answers that very question very clearly. The solution is free the Khalistan, lad. It is Khalistan Zindabad, James.
And we can't say it better than that, can we, Angus?
Absolutely. Khalistan Zindabad indeed, which is exactly the way we should end every show. A marvellous way to end Perspectives once again. Do keep those comments coming in. We do appreciate them, as I said. Do keep the educational and informative comments coming. We particularly love those because they're always good to have a good talk about, and it helps us research all sorts of interesting areas that we otherwise might not have thought about. Don't forget you can message us directly at message@satellage.tv.com if there's anything you want to bring to our attention directly, as many of you have done. Thank you for that. But that is it for another day. Thanks so much for watching. It is a goodbye from me. It is a goodbye from James.
Stay safe, everyone.
You have, of course, been watching Perspectives. We will see you next time.